right, he is a CNN contributor and Democratic Party strategist, Paul Begala, and she's a Republican Congresswoman for Florida, Representative Paulina Luna. All right. First question is for you. Do you think we are headed, Congresswoman, for a full disclosure and transparency about UAPs, which we used to call UFOs? I do. I mean, I think it was just this week. Didn't they start a website for releasing this information?
From my understanding, they're going to put it on the National Archives, but if they've booked the website. So I actually head up the disclosure task force in Congress on declassification of federal secrets. And what I will tell you is
that's why you know so much stuff.
I'm a nerd. In all seriousness, there's some things that we can't explain. And there is a problem with overclassification, but also when you have duly elected members of Congress being denied access, that's a problem because we're supposed to be the, check and balance on some of these agencies. And so you'll see some interesting stuff. The federal government will never come out and tell you what to believe.
I think they're here.
Well, there's definitely stuff that we can't explain.
I'm not
I'm
shy
still
about
searching
it.
for intelligent life on Earth, so I'll be I'm not into that.
Well,
I think we're in a big universe.
You may not be into that, but they're into you. Okay? I mean, whether you want to believe it or not, things...
Why do they always put the probes there? Well, if they're that sophisticated, can't they just scan us?
But see, but if you want to be serious about it, there was an era where we heard a lot about probing. That ended. Because, I mean, we never heard about any of it before we got nuclear weapons. Right after the nuclear bomb went off in 1945. Suddenly the aliens were like, maybe we ought to pay attention to these people.
Well, there were reports of sightings and whatnot dating back into even, for many, 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 many centuries.
If you're talking about some of the stuff like we see in hieroglyphics and drawings,
I think
it could be, yes, it could be like they built the pyramids. That's true.
Well, I think that there's a lot of theories, but based on what we're seeing evidence-wise, there is one specific agency where multiple members of Congress, to include myself, received a briefing from. All of that information will be declassified, and the stuff that we saw in that briefing we can't explain.
But I mean, if I could get back to the anal probing.
Odd topic.
It seems like there was a time where they needed to do that to find out about it. Like so many people have this almost the exact same recollection. Now, maybe it's some psychological phenomenon that we don't realize, but people independently seem to have this kind of vague memory, and they lost a little track of time. Maybe it was the GHB. I don't know. But it seemed like the aliens were trying to find out what makes these people tick. Who are these humans? And then I think they got that information. And in the last 10, 20 years, it's not been that. What it's been has been very, very serious people. I'm talking about military people who are constantly saying, we see things we cannot explain.
Actually,
either China has a weapon we don't know about, which is unlikely, or it's just something you're going to have to tell me what it is.
What we've seen in the briefings, and I actually asked this question to Secretary Clinton, as she was actually going to, had she won her election, be in charge of disclosure and actually releasing some of this information. And she thinks that the American people, I think this is one of the most bipartisan things in Congress currently, and bicameral in the Senate as well. But we should be able to release the information that we have specifically pertaining to this and let the American people decide what it is. Look, some of it is balloons, some of it is drones, and then there's a portion of it that we can't explain where you have credible people from all walks of life confirming it. And I will tell you, based on the evidence that we have seen, there's something there. And
credible people, not just in the military, but in government, including Democrats.
I was struck by what President Obama said, and I agree with it. The vastness of the universe is such that the arithmetic makes it pretty likely.
Right.
And the vastness of the universe is such, it's pretty unlikely that we're going to cross paths. And I think that's also true. I mean, it seems to... I'm a skeptic, but I like what you're doing, Congresswoman. I think put it all out, let people decide. I'm a skeptic. Maybe you can do...
Well, Bill, I think this gets into a deeper... If you have time, listen to the Joe Rogan podcast I did. But this gets into a deeper discussion on where you're at spiritually. And I think there's just a lot that we have and can't explain. But look, my biggest concern and why I got involved is because I had the Department of Defense at the time tell me that we were not allowed access, and I have the highest clearance possible. So if you have a duly membered elected member of government, not just myself, but other members being denied access, you have this aspect of then who's really in control. If we're writing the checks, if you have the Pentagon failing audits, denying access, this is a problem. And so there is this aspect of government transparency going back to how do we actually fix this country, and you have to start with transparency.
Okay. What do you make of the... this is for you, Paul. What do you make of the recent polling that suggests California may be choosing between two Republican candidates for governor?
I love that.
I'm sure you do. We have jungle primaries out here, right? I mean, I think that means you can have as many candidates, and the top two, it doesn't have to be from different parties. It's the top two no matter what party. And the top two polling now are both Republicans. That says...
Right.
Join me, come on.
It just means the Democrats got to get their act together. I don't live in a state that does this, but I kind of like the idea of these jungle primaries. The idea is, I think, to produce more moderate nominees.
Totally, yes.
Seems like a good idea. If it produces two Republicans, that's what it produces. Democrats got to get their act together and hone in on one or two of their strongest instead of having 20.
Let me ask a follow-up question. What does that information tell you about Gavin Newsom's chance to get the nomination? Because obviously he's running for president, and Josh Shapiro is running for president. And, I mean, Josh Shapiro, he was here last week. Yeah. He has a really good story to tell about his state. Now, I like Gavin a lot, but that's a lot harder story to tell.
Oh, I think my party has more talent than I've ever seen. This is part of the tragedy of Joe Biden running, is that he had the best bench behind him that I've ever seen. And Gavin is part of it, and Shapiro's part of it, Wes Moore, Andy Bashir. I'm naming people. My buddy Rahm Emanuel has been on your show. He's seriously thinking about it. He's winning the ideas primary.
Do you have a favorite among those?
Don't. Well, Rahm is one of my closest friends. Okay, so if he runs, I'm for it, period. I mean, he and I, we're like brothers.
Right.
But in terms of talent, let's put them, we don't know until they're on the track. Let's put them on the track. But I want, unlike in 2024, I want a primary, and I want it to be vicious. I want fighting.
So you want MAGA?
Steel sharpens steel.
So you want MAGA?
But I think I certainly don't want MAGA. But when Hillary ran against Barack, I was part of that group.
No.
I was for Hillary, but I was like, oh, this is terrible. It wasn't. It wasn't. The toughest primary I ever saw in my life was Hillary versus Barack, and it made Barack tougher and stronger and smarter. It made Hillary Secretary of State, the party united. So I'm now for tough primaries. My Uncle George always says this. Uncle George's law is about these kind of family fights. He's like, you know why God gave us family? So we wouldn't have to fight with strangers. So...
Okay. I heard Gavin use this phrase, culturally normal. Did you see that?
I know.
He was asked about, I guess, how the Democrats can win. And I think that phrase is going to bubble up. He said they have to learn to be more culturally normal. How do you think that? Put some meat on those bones. What does that mean?
We used to be the party of the factory floor, and now we're the party of the faculty lounge. And I say this, I'm a faculty member at UVA. But this elitism, this intellectual elitism on my side is so off-putting. And the sanctimony, the judgmentalism. I saw Andy Bashir recently. He told me that someone talked to him about, and the phrase was, justice-involved populations. Do you have any idea what that is?
Prisoners.
Prisoners. I grew up in a prison town. We did not call them justice. We call them crooks, prisoners, convicts, inmates.
I think Gavin made a big mistake with his reading comment. And I just think that, I actually know Nicki Minaj. She's now, as you know, very Republican. But I think that she pointed out, this aspect of politicians make these comments and they're not themselves.
What are you referring to? Tell them what you're referring to. He was talking to the mayor of Atlanta.
Yeah, I don't want to misquote him, but basically the implication was he wasn't, good at
reading. He was trying to say, I'm one of you.
Yeah.
So he basically said, I'm dyslexic. I don't read very good. Like you guys.
Yeah, and
it just came. It just was.
But it's insulting, right? It's
insulting, and it's also a function of when you're on a book tour running for president, you do 1 million events a day. Your brain is fried at 8 o'clock at night, and you're trying to not step on a landmine, and you do. And I think we all have to show some grace when people do that.
I understand.
No one thinks he's really a racist.
I will say this though. There have been a number of occasions. I actually reached out to him directly on helping out with the Tory Lanez case. As you know, Tory Lanez is convicted for allegedly shooting Megan Thee Stallion, right? Allegedly. But there's a lot to that with the evidence.
Really?
Yeah, there is.
This is important.
And his office actually was contacted about potentially pardoning. And what I will say is that, I think that there's a lot of people that had reached out to him, but he's not the only one. There's another case specifically that's pretty high profile. And I just, that'll come up if he runs.
This rose on your list of, like, important issues.
These are, you would be surprised at the multitasking.
You got to get into the Megan Thee Stallion case.
Well, we had someone reach out, and this was kind of following the whole issue of, gun law, chain of custody, improper prison reform. And so, yeah, it's like kind of one of our things I dabble in.
Justice-involved populations, Congresswoman. Get your
prison reform, right? It's like...
They're not prisons anymore.
FCC Chairman Brendan Carr issued a new warning threatening broadcasters that are running hoaxes and news distortions. Does the administration have legitimate gripes, or are they just unhappy with negative coverage? Yes, the chairman of the FCC is threatening people. I mean, God, the hypocrisy on both sides. But really, I mean, this is the country of everything's terrible unless our side does it.
Well,
look, when Biden was president, it was terrible infringement on free speech. And now this guy's the head of the FCC basically saying, we're going to take your license if we don't like the joke you do.
Well, I think joking's a big difference than running foreign propaganda. And I think this gets into a bigger...
Who's running foreign?
Well, getting into a bigger kind of discussion here. What we're finding specifically with, our amazing country and having our First Amendment is that countries use it against us, and there have been instances, and I think that this ties into kind of the conversation of influencer disclosures on who they're taking money from, whether or not people are advocating on behalf of a foreign government. And so tying to that, I had read loosely into this, and what I will say is that, if you have someone that's knowingly engaging in pushing propaganda for a foreign country and you actually can catch them, that's a little bit different case. If you have people that are knowingly making false statements, drive-by character assassination, different than joking.
Okay, but that's not what this is about. They're threatening people. They're threatening networks.
The whole point of the First Amendment is to protect us from the government.
Yeah.
Okay? Corporations, CNN could fire me tomorrow. They have a perfect right to. Okay, fine. That's not censorship. That's just, I did a bad job, they fired me. But the government weighing in, saying you have to fire Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Kimmel, Bill Maher, that's bullshit. That's fascism.
Well,
there's a big difference.
I think there's a line, though. I think there's a line, like certain networks, you can't say certain things on television, right? Or else you're civilly liable. And I think that this kind of ties into, look, admittedly, I have to look into it more, but what I will say is that I think the FCC, if people have licensing, I'll get into this real quick before we move on. When Charlie Kirk was assassinated, I actually contacted the FCC and I asked them to take down the videos that were being reposted of him because there were other outlets that were posting it very quickly and they were refusing a takedown, and the family wanted those videos down. And they contacted the different social media platforms, and they basically said, like, your terms and conditions say that you have to adhere to a certain guideline, and if you guys are not going to do that, like, we have to reevaluate. And it did admittedly force these people to take down that assassination video.
And anybody who made fun of that was repulsive.
Yes.
And yet, in a free country with free speech, bad taste cannot be outlawed. I mean, after he was assassinated, we basically had blasphemy laws here for a couple of months. I don't know if it's still going on, but you just could not say anything about Charlie Kirk. And, to be...
People said certain things, but I think there's a big difference between saying certain things and actually glorifying his assassination and wearing shirts with blood on it, calling and saying that he was rightfully executed.
Horrible. Just like when Donald Trump Jr. mocked Paul Pelosi when he was fighting for his life.
Yeah, exactly.
An animal bashed his
it's
head.
Like...
That was appalling. Everybody who criticized, who said those things
everything's
about
terrible until our side does it, and then it's perfectly okay.
Everybody who does that is a jerk.
I'm not making excuses, but what I will say is there is an aspect of our own First Amendment currently that's actually being exploited by places like China that's inundating with propaganda, and there are people... There are very wealthy people that are currently being investigated, without saying too much, that have been caught tied to terrorist networks in other countries like China pushing propaganda in an effort to break our country apart. That is a fact. I will come back and explain, and I can do an entire segment on China.
No, you're all good. You're good at this. You're good at your job.
It's not just a job. I believe in this.
No, I know you do. Oh, final. Final question for you. Who better represents the future of MAGA, J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio?
Oh, that's a dirty question. That is a dirty question.
You can't answer?
I don't know if it's true, so I don't want to speculate. I think them as a ticket would be a winning ticket.
But who's on top?
Well, I think they'll have to battle it out. But I think that Secretary Rubio has done a phenomenal job in foreign policy. He really has. He was the only cabinet appointee that was actually unanimously voted into the position. And he also has, I think, one of the higher approval ratings currently.
Okay.
And so he's done great. But J.D. is also someone that I campaigned with, actually, in California during the presidential primary, and someone that I think has the ability to connect with people on a level, you know, his story, Hillbilly Elegy. He is the type of person that did come from a normal upbringing. We need more of that in Washington, D.C.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.